Hey, and welcome to what I think are my most exciting videos to make. It's all the update videos. And this is Twinmotion 2022.1 preview. It's a preview. Just remember that. It's a preview. So, before we get into it, because there's a lot to get into, please demolish that like button because, why are you here? You like it, right? I hope so. That also tells me you might have learned something. Please do that if you learned something because it helps me out. Helps me out in multiple ways. So, getting into it now. Twinmotion 2022.1 preview. Okay, there's a lot here, and I'm going to constantly be referencing all the new updates, like on the actual release notes, and I will leave that in the description below because there's a lot. So, definitely make sure to look for that in the description. So, what are we looking at? Well, immediately, there's a few things. The toolbar, and this is perhaps the biggest update, the thing I'm most excited about, and that is this grid-looking icon here. And you might be asking, what is that? Well, let me come over here, and I'm just going to press the button. And what is happening? Well, it is essentially, quote, real-time. It is technically real-time, but it is rendering using ray tracing. And ray tracing is just an advanced way of using your graphics card to actually sample multiple light bounces based on the pixels and whatever, that's all fine. But what we care about is we actually get some nice looking images, and this is still in real time, so I can move this, and it re-renders basically. So I actually have it on the lowest settings for the purposes of this video and the fact that I want this thing to actually render quickly and see the result. So let's actually explore the settings a bit more instead of just saying, hey, it's cool, it's great. So this is a toggle on or off, and whenever it's off, we can see it's all real time normally, but it's not the path tracing, it's not the ray tracing, it's not what we're expecting to see based on that type of rendering. So when I do enable it, it immediately just starts. It's going to render no matter what happens. Whenever you stop or whenever you do any sort of command, after you finish that command, it's going to re-render the image. Now, this is good and bad. Not necessarily as bad as I'm saying and making it sound to be. It's not that bad. The only inconvenience is that it will do it every time, and so if you're trying to actually work, just turn it off. Like, literally just turn it off, and then maybe you decide, okay, well, I want to see what this looks like. Boom. Really quick. That was 3 seconds. Really quick, and that's particularly because I have this on low. So there are 3 different settings, and not only that, we'll get this progress bar that actually will progress as it is completing the rendering. Once it completes, it's done, and I can see that it's not working anymore to get this rendering done. So this is on low. It's pretty quick. If I put this on medium, it's going to start taking some time, and then we see the progress bar going. There's obviously I'm going to need a lot more detail out of this image, and so finally now it is done, like right now. And I don't want to have to wait for this every time I want to move. Now, I can still move and do what I want to do, but you can see it's trying to constantly render. And that's great. I like that. It's literally real-time ray tracing renders. But I don't want to do that all the time, so I'll keep it on low. Now, that's all cool, but we haven't explored quite all the settings, and I want to show you that before we leave path tracing, because this is, in my opinion, the most exciting addition to 2020.2. So in the burger menu, as they would say, in the preferences, we have actually a number of preferences to look at. Of course, we've got the units, the time step, but we now have graphic hardware support. And here's the big thing. Now, you have to have a video card that supports DirectX 12. And I believe, just offhand, this is all of the RTX or ray tracing cards from NVIDIA. I'm not as familiar with AMD cards when it comes to comparing and having the capability of doing ray tracing, but using the 2000 and 3000 series of NVIDIA's baseline, you should be able to actually use all of these new updates, and particularly the path tracing, because you have DirectX 12. So if you have support and all that, this will be checked by default, and you'll be able to use path tracing. Cool, that's good. Now, finally, the path tracing. I'm not going to go over all of these settings now because I want to do a separate path tracing video because there's a lot to look at, and we can start to get in more detail in that video. But what we're looking at here is really a more in-depth settings, of course, here, preferences, for the low, medium, and high presets that we were just toggling between. So typically, I'm never going to go to high when I'm trying to work or move around the scene. It's just a mess. It would take forever. We already saw that at medium. So I would only probably just go to low as I'm just moving around, but maybe medium or high, depending on the type of image I'm trying to export and the quality I want. But I can see myself never going to medium, just kind of going from low to high. But really, quick overview, these are basically just resolutions. And so we have our samples per pixel. Basically, we're getting the light bouncing around. We've got different bounce settings, of course. If we want the light to bounce more times and basically fill the scene more, we'd probably get more ambient light from that. There's tests we can run in the path tracing video itself. But then we've got the samples per pixel. Basically, how many times is that pixel going to be sampled and rendered? And obviously, the higher the number, the higher resolution, the better it looks, all this, whatever. So again, all of this is default. Haven't changed it. I would leave this the way it is for now until you start to get a handle of the path tracer. Cool. Then we have Skydomes. Oh, we're going to get to this. So Skydome resolution. We now have Skydomes within Twinmotion, which, again, this is probably my second favorite, if not tied for first when it comes to improving the quality of not only your scene, but your export images and videos. We've seen these similar settings within the probes resolution. Instead of having an actual number associated to it, we just see a low, medium, high. Again, the medium's default, not a huge deal. Other than that, we have point clouds. Again, something else we're going to look at. Only option we have is high quality export. I haven't tested this out. We'll save this for another video, but we are going to look at point clouds too. So cool. We've looked at all this. Make sure you have DirectX 12 if you're going to use the path tracer, and then all these settings. Cool. Something I want to point out is just remember is that export settings and what you get when you export is different than what you're working with in the view, in the scene here. And a great example of that, and I'm talking about the path tracer, but this applies to anything. When I've got this on low, and you can see where my grass is fading. It's like, halfway. But as I move the camera, we can see that, I actually have grass and vegetation all the way around this, green ring. And the thing I want to point out is that the path tracer is responding to what we see in the scene, and what we see in the scene is not exactly what would be exported within any sort of export setting. So I'll show you this here in the preferences. We've got, this is not new, but grass fading. I have this at medium, but if I put this at far, the path tracer is going to go again because I have a new command, I've moved, I've done some sort of setting update. But now we can see that my grass fades farther because I set it to far. We would expect that, but now the path tracer picks it up. But the thing to remember is if I'm exporting with the path tracer instead of just a traditional rendering, I would get the grass showing up all the way around, which is what I would expect. So again, all of these settings, as far as like the grass fade, this or that, is going to be dependent on what you see in the viewport. So just be aware of that, and make sure if you want to see more of the grass in your exports that it's seen and that you have that setting checked. Okay, moving on now. So we've looked at path tracing, and for that, I'm going to turn this off so we can actually navigate our scene. You can see we have a completely different kind of quality, and so I think there's not only a different kind of quality that we get from path tracing, but just the fact that it looks so much better and a little more natural even in the viewport. Okay, so we've looked at path tracing, and we can see, looking at this toolbar, some of the icons are a bit updated. We have the same material picker. This is going to do the exact same thing that we're used to. It's going to pick the material, show it down here, whatever. That's all fine. It's slightly updated. But I do want to point you to this little pull-out menu, which is actually going to include all the normal transform options, whether that's simply translating, rotating, or scaling. They're all going to be hidden here within this, I guess, bin, you could call it. And it's nice when I hit tab, it'll still change, but it's just more visually appealing. It makes a little more sense. It's not this weird menu anymore, so that's cool. But we do have a couple of new tools or icons to look at, and that includes here, we've got the toggle local world axis. Ooh. And then we've got pivot edit. This is all interesting. And this is going to apply particularly whenever you're trying to place an object and get it located correctly. maybe what we'll do is place a decal. So I'm going to come over here, and I want to actually put this on an angled surface. You'll see why here in just a second, but I want to put this on an angled surface. We could see it, yeah, fits nicely right there. We don't need this menu. And I'm going to take this, I'm just going to blow this up a bit so we can see what we're doing. So we've got this decal, and now I have, of course, the gizmo that we're all used to using. Now if I move this around using basically the center or the origin, it's going to snap to the face, which is nice. And if I move it down to this face here, it's obviously going to snap to the face, which is really good. That's nice. That's really, really helpful. But let's say I want to rotate this. Well, I can rotate it just like that, and it's basically stuck on that x-axis, which is not good. That's not what I want. Now, the way around that would be to rotate it certainly, it's just a mess. But now we don't have to deal with that at all. We can come over here to these new icons, and we have, again, toggle local world axis. You're basically toggling between the local and the world axis. So the world axis is everything we see here. We've got Z straight up, and then we've got X and Y going the other directions. But when it comes to a local, we have something for a particular object. So this object, in a sense, is local, and it's a part of the world. Now, what does all that mean? Well, the local gizmo, the local basically toggling this axis, it can be reset from associating that to the world, as in Z is straight up and you got X and Y. But what we can do is change this to local, and what local does is reassociates, in a way, the gizmo to the current location, the current, basically where this particular element is in the world. And so whenever I click this toggle button, you can see that not only did the gizmo move, but now whenever I rotate it, I can literally rotate it on this axis, like on that angle, which is perfect. That's awesome. And you can see my toggle stays because it's a toggle. The translate works now. Now if I move this back and then I try and translate, I'm just going to move it in and out of a wall. That's not what we want. So toggling in here, I can translate it nicely. I can still snap to faces, no problem. And that's awesome. Okay. Fantastic. That is really helpful. And I'll be honest, that's something I didn't even know that I needed. But we have it now, which is great. And so one other thing we want to look at here is when we expand this menu is this pivot edit. And when we expand the menu, we can see there's a reset and a center pivot. Okay, over here. Here we go. I don't really want to place another decal. Let's put an object here, and it doesn't matter the object, but maybe we will place a chair. This chair is beautiful. We'll place it right there. So whenever I click on this, we can see that there's my gizmo. It's at the bottom there, and when I can move it around, translate, this is all fine. And the exact same would work here if I put this on an angled surface and I actually used the local versus world. It would all work the same, whether it's a flat decal or a piece of furniture. It doesn't matter. Okay, but something else here we have is we have this pivot edit. So we actually have pivot edit, which is one icon. Then we've got center and then reset pivot. So I'm going to just click on this pivot edit, and we can see that we get little bubbles that show up here at the end, and we have the same gizmo that we're familiar with, but I can move this around. And whenever I move this around, the chair or the furniture, whatever it is, anything, it will not move because I'm editing the pivot point. And so if I move this over here and then I toggle this to be off, I'm done pivot editing. I can turn this off, and then my pivot is now there. It's stuck to the object, and it's there. So I love this so much, and I don't love it so much for this application, like a chair, but I do love this for lights. Specifically lights from Revit and light sources and all of that. If you remember previous videos of trying to get that thing located, we can reset this pivot for these lights, and so they're not on the ground, they're actually where the light source is coming from. That's fantastic. So besides that, what do I do now? Well, I can decide, expanding this menu to center the pivot. And the best, from what I can tell, and this might change if we have multiple objects or if there's multiple objects within one true element, I guess you could say, this center or reset would actually appear to be different. So right now, the center and actually resetting it is just going to put it at the center. And that's fine. That's not a big deal. I mean, that's just something to know. It's basically the center is probably going to be the reset point, but that could be completely wrong. If for some reason your object comes in and the pivot point's there just by default, then you might want to actually center it But if you actually reset it, it might move back. That's something to be aware of based on the current location and where you want it to be and everything. So maybe what we want to do, obviously we can really, any object can do this, which is great, and that's really cool. We can do that with any object. It doesn't have to be just chairs or furniture, decal, whatever. It could be absolutely anything. But something I did want to do is come back to these decals, and again, it doesn't matter which one we're going to use. This one is perfectly fine. So if we're using this decal, something I wanted to show is that we can toggle the local to world. So if I go ahead and place this here, I can see that it's set right now to world, because this is, you can see that the gizmo's facing straight up. But I can also just have this set to local, and we can see it's coming right off. We can see it's responding to the angle that it's set to, which is really cool. So it can be set that way by default, just based on this toggle on or off. And so putting it there, I'm already on my local, and I can just move it around there, move it to another axis. Boom, easy. I like this. It's very simple, yet not something I really knew that I wanted. Okay, now the fun part, another fun part. So finally, let's look at Skydome. Skydome's awesome stuff. The quality you're about to see. So when we expand the library, we can see we have a new icon. It's Skydome. Cool. We can also find Skydomes if we come over here to our settings and then lighting, and there is Skydome here at the left, a brand new, completely new tool and everything. Cool. So let's click on Skydome, and already we have a lot to choose from, which I'm excited about. We've got morning and afternoon, and not only within morning and afternoon, we have clear, cloudy, and overcast. Then we've got noon, and we've got the same clear, cloudy, overcast, low sun, same deal. So we've got tons to choose from. You're basically going to find whatever you need if the sun is up. The only thing I can say right off the bat is that I don't see night, which obviously the lighting would have to change significantly and respond pretty significantly if we chose a night Skydome. That's besides the point right now. We don't need to go into that. So let's go ahead and just choose a noon, and then maybe it's cloudy. All of these Skydomes, look at this. There's so many, and this is just, the previews are great because you can see the full sky, and not only can you see the full sky, but you can see it basically through glass and responding to a mirror, and then a solid, like 100% rough object, how it's responding. So you literally get to see everything that you'd want to as far as objects responding to the sky. It's really cool. It's smart and easy to use. I like this. Okay, so let's say we like these. Well, we have to download these just like we do other objects from Quixel or whatever. Not a huge deal. Once you're signed in, not a huge deal. Again, it's free. Just do this. It's going to be associated to this project, and you're good to go. So while that downloads, we can come over here and we can turn Skydomes on. That's the first thing we need to do. We turn it on, and it's going to load, and this is like a one-time load. Once it loads, it's going to be there, and because it's a static thing, which is cool. Okay, so like we've loaded one in. Cool. But it looks decent, looks pretty good. The clouds, obviously, everything looks better. But the main thing is that like everything looks like it's more related to the sky, because that's kind of the point of the Skydomes. The sky and the sun are now related, along with the lighting. It's kind of all together like you would expect. So within Skydome, let's go to more. And maybe we want to change this to our noon cloudy. Well, I'll just drag that in, and it's going to update it. And once it updates it, we can start going through some of these settings really quickly. I'm not going to go through them all because I will create a separate video for Skydome, because there's a decent amount to it. But immediately we can see that there's an intensity, which it's going to be similar to exposure, but it's the intensity of the Skydome itself. So this is nearly loaded. There we go. It's like, look at this. This looks so nice. And it's fairly cloudy. It's a nice cloudy day. And there's the sun. So the coolest part of Skydomes is that we can match the sun by default, just by clicking match sun. When I uncheck that, we can see that my lighting gets all weirded up because I've got a sun up here, and my sun for my Skydome is somewhere else. And I don't know where it is, but we basically want to match the sun. And so let's just see what happens when we move the time of day. Well, in fact, nothing, because it's a Skydome. It's static. It's stuck. So that's one disadvantage. Another thing we can do is rotate it, which is great if you did need to adjust your shadows or anything like that, or make sure you're hitting the right time of day, getting the sun in the right location, all that. Skydome affects lighting, which you kind of want to by default because the Skydome is kind of the light, it's the sun, it's all associated. And then we've got smog, all that. Again, there's tons of different things here. And then finally, when we go back into the settings or the preferences, looking at the Skydome resolution, this is just, it's what we're used to seeing with the probes. You've got a viewport and an export option. I like to keep probably the viewport lower, but the export, I'm probably always going to put that at high. Just like the probes resolution, I'm probably always going to max out at 1024. I just want the highest quality when I export. So cool, easy stuff, looks really nice, and I'd say this, along with the path tracing, dramatically increases everything that you might want to do as far as producing renderings. It's just beautiful stuff. And so when we go back to lighting, there's my Skydome. I can simply turn that on and off with a toggle easily right there. I like it. And when we come back to our settings, we see we have a brand new button as well, which this is all associated to the path tracer. We've got the path tracer here. I can turn it on here, or I can turn it on down there. But whenever I turn it on, there's tons of settings. And again, I'm not going to go through all of these settings in this video because we'd lose our minds. It'd be way too long. But there's a lot here. And not only are there just like quality settings that we can adjust between low, medium, high, but all of these. So let's turn this off before we get like too overwhelmed. And finally, let's take a look at point clouds. So if you're not familiar with point clouds, it's basically LiDAR, and people use lasers to scan areas, and it could be any object. It could be like a person, it could be a building. Generally in architecture, we see that a lot for gaining the existing conditions or as-built conditions of a space, so you can literally model and measure based on what's existing, and that's really helpful. So what I've done, I've downloaded just a sample parking lot. Like, it's nothing fantastic. It's not mine. I just found it, and so it's going to be just like any other import. We're going to come over to import. I'm going to click import, and now we have geometry, direct link, landscape, like we've always had, but now we have point cloud, which is cool. It's just another thing that we can import. We've got different file types here, but I've just got this parking lot, and again, this is not my parking lot, I don't know, but I'm going to click import. It's going to take a second to import, and we will actually get to interact with the point cloud. And so what I can see happening is that I'll have my point cloud for an existing portion of the project, and then I'll have my design, my architecture, however that is responding to what's existing, and I will be able to work with them both together, view them both together within Twinmotion, and we can go from there. So just by default, it throws it all the way to the bottom. And I'm going to click the parking lot and also press F, and it's going to take me there. And, it's a long ways away. I don't know how this model icon, I don't know how all of this was set up, but it was set up way over here. That's fine. Not a big deal. So when we get here, we can see that the quality isn't that great. And I'm not saying that it is great. I'm not saying that yours would look just as good. I don't know. I really don't know. We can start to get an idea of some of the places they were standing. We can see that the ground here looks pretty good, but whenever you get behind this bush, we've lost the data, basically because the laser did not get to the other side. So this looks kind of absurd, mainly because the quality is pretty bad, but you can see some of their survey points here. There's literally a laser right there. People, cars, like it picks up everything. But I'm going to zoom in on some of these trees, and we can see that what we're actually working with. So they're just a bunch of squares. And I don't know. You can look at this and see, well, this is kind of stupid. This looks ridiculous. Well, I will say the quality here is very low. It's not that great, but you can start to see how this can be useful whenever we're comparing and using existing versus new. And then finally, look at the settings. We can change this point size. Basically, we can increase this or not. This doesn't do a whole lot for me. Like, this doesn't actually improve the quality. It just makes it more blocky. We can have it cast shadows or not. We can change these to circles. Not a huge deal. But the cool thing, I guess this is cool. I don't know. I might want to try and find a better looking one, but I'll save that for like the actual point cloud video in the future. But we can actually walk on it. Like, it's literally a surface. So I can put this on pedestrian mode and I can walk around. Basically this is just serving to give us and like show us the scale of a space, which is interesting. Obviously be aware if I walk over here, I'll fall to my death, but this isn't bad. For something, brand new, it's a new feature. We can look at these point clouds in here. Before, we'd have to be looking at this in Revit and like comparing it with it in Revit, which is exactly what I would do, because I need to model things in Revit and get things like worked out and and matching dimensionally, but I can bring that in here too. But that's fine. We will save this for another video, but that is point clouds. And of course, if we look at our preferences again, all the way at the bottom, we can choose high quality export if we want. Not that I necessarily need to, but it's there if you want to do that. On top of that, we've got lots of new assets, which is always nice. Like you'll scroll through and see some more new ones. We've got, of course, new Quixlex Assets, which are really nice. So the high quality models that you can always get into, new furniture, all of this. It's fine. It's kind of what we'd expect to see with the new release. More assets. You kind of get that with any program, and it's nice to see. We do have in the exports, we have Panorama Set, which is really nice because maybe you wanted to create 5, I think it's 5 up to like 100 that you could put into a Panorama Set. So you could have any number up to 100 in a Panorama Set. And all this is going to allow is that we have multiple exports that fall into one set. And so whenever you actually have those within the cloud, I can then send an entire set as opposed to like single panoramas to a client or other designers in the cloud. So very nice. And the way the cloud will work now is that I'll just end up copying a link and they can view it that way. You can share it that way. I think there's an optional password if you want, things like that. And finally, I'm not going to show this update because there's quite a lot more that goes into it. But with the addition of 2020.2, one new feature, which I think this might turn out to be one of the most underrated. I don't know how much I'll utilize this, but it is within the direct link. So first of all, when it comes to importing, all of the settings between the direct link and I believe like view in Twinmotion, all of those, basically Datasmith and just direct link out of Revit, all of those settings are going to be the same, so you're not going to have to work between one or the other depending on which type of importer you're using. But besides that, with Datasmith now, if you're using Datasmith, I'd recommend you do that because I think the quality is so much better and the ease of it and the extra functionality is nice. But besides that, we actually are going to get a CSV file or Excel or spreadsheet, whatever, that is or can be associated to your model, and that is basically Revit, Twinmotion kind of working together. And this is basically going to be a report of all of the objects that you have in the entire model, along with their associated materials. And the nice thing is that if you decide, well, I want every single one of these objects to be this material, you can update that in the CSV or in the Excel file, and then whenever you're direct linking into Twinmotion, you can have that file associated to it. And I'll leave the link to all this in the description below because there's a lot to it. But the main thing we can see here is if we go to File, the new thing here to look at is we have Export All Libraries. Okay, well if we do that, and I come over here to, I'll call this test. We'll download this, and I will open this file, and it's a ridiculous file. I mean, you can see this. It's showing all my materials and like IDs associated to them, all of these objects. But the thing is that all these objects do have like actual Twinmotion materials to them. So what I can do is if I decide, well, I want all of these tiles to have this material, I can update this CSV file and then I can actually load that in with my model. So again, I'm going to save this for another video. There's a lot to it, but basically it's going to allow you to better manage what objects receive which materials, not only like just for your viewing purposes, but for like actually setting them. You can like set it prior to going into Twinmotion and then kind of back and forth between Revit and Twinmotion, updating that CSV file as you need to based on the elements that come out of Revit. So really cool stuff. This is a long video. I do apologize for the length, and then for every like little new feature that we're probably going to have a separate video for, because there's a lot more that we can look at in greater detail, which is what I like to do. That's what we do on this channel. We don't just glaze over everything. This kind of what this video is, so I apologize for the glazing. But in future videos, we are going to look at these in greater detail because I think that's really important. So if you're new here, maybe consider demolishing that like button. If you learned something, definitely demolish that like button. It tells me that you might have learned something or that you might have just liked the video. So welcome if you're new. And that'll do it for this one. We will see you in the next Twinmotion video. There's going to be a lot more. Clearly, there's a lot to look at. So Thank you very much for spending your time here. Hopefully you learned something, and I will see you in the next one.